I'm Joshua Adams, and this is the Industry Insights Podcast, where I am joined in the Rock Paper Simple studio by community leaders as we dive into industry topics and perspectives. Thanks for joining us. Today I have Russ Bruhn with Brevard Public Schools, the head of communications.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. Well, today I was hoping to chat a little bit about communications, obviously.
I like it.
You're head of communications for an organization that I would think I'm accurate in saying you have the most stakeholders in Brevard County of any other organization.
We think so. I mean, we think it's the only time I get nervous is when I have to send an email to all of our parents, which is like over 100,000.
Right.
So there's 605,000 roughly people that live in the county. And so we think that each one of them are a stakeholder because right. BPS is across the county. The work we do in the classroom and outside the classroom affects everybody on some level. Obviously, our students, the most, 70,000, 8,000 employees. And then, of course, all the people that are connected to those families are our kind of intimate stakeholders, if you would. Right. But then about 2/3 of the county, we still think that they should be informed about what we do, the impact we have, the impact we're trying to have on business, property taxes, being good citizens.
Yeah, it's just incredible looking at, sometimes you think, okay, it's just the students you have to communicate with, but then you're like, wait, no. You're communicating with students, parents, teachers, and then other organizations that are impacted, businesses, government organizations, right? So the amount of people you're communicating with on a daily basis is incredible. So we've established you have a lot of people to talk to in the county on a regular basis. I think there's no question there. But tell me a little bit about what are the major considerations you have in mind when you're thinking about that audience that you have to communicate with?
And it really is looking at what is the audience. So sometimes, if we're talking about employees, that's 8,000 across the county. And so how you message them and how you communicate with them is different. That could be morale building, that could be team building, that could obviously be, presenting important information either from the superintendent's point of view or the school district's point of view. And it's also being responsive because one thing that gets great about educators in general is there are a lot of why people. They like to know things. They like to teach. They like to learn. And so when you're communicating really with anybody, it's important, from my point of view at least, is to give them the why, let them understand why something is being sent out. You also have other communication outside, whether it's with the business world, obviously families, our volunteers. If there's crisis communication that comes up from time to time, how do you take care of that? And so really during the day, each day, it's kind of a shuffling of priorities based on, emerging issues. Some good, some bad, some that we can handle, some that'll be longer term. And so it's always kind of keeping your head on a swivel and being ready to respond and to support either the employee, my bosses, or, the families or the community in general.
How do you decide, right? I imagine that there's an amount of things you could be saying every day, right? Just an enormous amount. How do you approach that level of different audiences, different messages, different priorities, different stakeholders, different stakeholders who have a large say in what you say? How do you balance all of that? How do you prioritize all of that?
The one thing that I think since I've been there about 3 years is that there's so many good things happening in each individual school, and each school is like a little community. They have different culture, they have different traditions, they have different leadership styles, they have different parent engagements, and they need to be treated as individuals. But we have 85 individual schools if you count a virtual school, and we're growing. We're adding at least one school right now, and some of our schools are expanding. So we're taking on even more students, more employees. And so being able to really, that's the biggest challenge, is being able to tell that story at that school to the appropriate audience and trying to find out how to narrow that down, but also how to then expand it so that people that may not know about it can maybe look at it and have a different view of the school that's down the block or even across the county.
Right. We actually had the opportunity to work together on some of that.
We have.
In the last few years, where we got to create and feature schools and talk about those individual schools, talk about the educators there. I loved our campaign on the educators' why. That was so much fun, talking about why it mattered to them. Really, really special. So it's been fun to work with you on some of those messages. So let's look at it takes a team, right? When you're looking at all these priorities and all these messages you've got to get out. How do you guys do that internally? How do you work as a team to get all that done?
Well, we have, a superintendent who is one of the most prominent positions in the county just based on that job. And, Dr. Rendell leads the team in that across the board. And so his communication plan, his communication style is important to us and kind of what we do. And he sets the tone of being transparent. We try to set, the template that we're going to showcase the positives because that doesn't get a lot of attention. But we're not trying to do a PR campaign. We're trying to tell the truth. We know there's struggles, there's challenges. But when you overcome those challenges, there's a success story. And so we try to tell as full a story as possible. And that really comes from the top with my boss. And so I appreciate his ability to be plugged in on that as well. But then I have a great team that I get to work with, whether it's a graphic artist, whether it's somebody working social media, have some good writers that are able to kind of go out, take photos, get video, kind of talk to teachers, talk to parents, talk to students, and tell the stories about their achievement, their worries, their concerns, and their hopes and dreams like anybody else.
What are some of the challenges you run into, right? So besides the enormity of sometimes what it looks like, what are some of the things you have to, dodge around? What are the challenges you run into?
I think that the biggest challenge, and I think anybody who runs a business, whether it's, a large business or a smaller business, is, time and then the ability to get the work done. Like I said, we have great stories in every school. And we have multiple stories that are happening in our schools. And so we rely on our schools to kind of let us know so that we can kind of amplify them. And so the biggest challenge is not missing something that's really good, and being able to kind of showcase that and get the secret out. Our career and technical education programs are some of the best in the nation, not just the Central Florida, not just Florida, the nation. And the ability to kind of tell that story, when I first got here, people called it the best kept secret. And that's kind of not a good thing. Like, you don't want to be a best kept secret. We want to be a known entity. And the opportunities that CTE gives to our students that are going to college, but that want to also pick up a skill, or students who want to go right to work after high school, it's second to none. And so we spend a lot of time on that particular story. But the challenge is, how do you reach 605,000 people so that everybody knows about it? Not just the ones who have kids in school. Obviously, they're the most important because they're the ones making those decisions about coursework. But the company that's hiring, or the retiree who has experience in that field that just moved here, and they can get involved potentially in that class that for CT, whether it's construction, space industry, carpentry, we have cybersecurity, all that kind of stuff. So that is a challenge. That's one example of a challenge that we try to face when it's telling our story in an accurate way. Again, not trying to make us look better than we are, but trying to be as accurate as possible so that people understand what is available so they get the most out of their education, because you get one chance to do it.
Right. So what are some of the channels, right? So there's a lot of different ways to communicate with people, right? So what are some of the channels that you guys use to reach these audiences?
So like a lot of other people, we use social media. So we're heavy on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are the three that we focus on. We are also on LinkedIn for some professional purposes as well, and that's helpful. Obviously, we have the district website. Every school has a website with information that is hopefully at the school level is appropriate for parents, students, and staff. But then also we try to get outside those channels, because obviously we can send an email to families when necessary. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out to tens of thousands of people as well. But those are ones that really have an obvious connection to us. And so the channels that we're trying to create now are the ones that are outside BPS's scope. So we're looking at chambers of commerce. We're looking at elected officials, giving them data, information that they can share, hopefully, that kind of gives a glimpse into what's going on day in, day out inside our schools, because it's not a secret. We're an open, under the sunshine business, and we want people to know what we're doing. And so we're this is a year that we're focused on looking at ways to kind of tell our message through other people, through other partners in the community.
Yeah, and I've seen that with the Chambers, the State of the Schools event. We've sponsored that last few years, and have been there, present, seen you there.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing that you guys in the community, I think, is great, right? So there's those traditional, more obvious ways for a large organization to communicate, but nothing beats getting into the community, being
Right.
physically in the community, being at the chamber events. We're big proponents of the Chambers of Commerce here. I'd love to see that. So I think looking at what are the creative ways to get out there, and maybe not as creative, just more obvious that you miss, right? Saying, hey, let me get out in the community. Let me be present.
And one of the things that we're doing with with Dr. Rendell, our superintendent. He's new to the job as of the summer, but not new to being a superintendent, not new to Brevard County. He's been an educator for almost 3 decades. He is starting in September, and it will continue throughout the fall and potentially into the next semester, a look at, town hall meetings across the district. And so those are going to be available for people to kind of attend, families, just community members. That's one way that he's doing that. Also communicating with the student stakeholders, and so making sure that their voices are heard. Last year, we had a series of meetings with our students across about 6 of our schools, and they brought a lot of good ideas about what they want out of their school experience, what they're getting, and the difference in between, and things like mental health, was important to them. Things like activities was important to them. Things like, making sure that they feel safe in school were important to them. And so everybody has a voice, and everybody needs to be heard. And so that's what makes me get up every day, trying to go out and try to find ways to get in front of people and get our decision makers in front of people that can kind of create those relationships. And then hopefully that trickles back into, our parents, circles of their friendships and families as well.
And I think you hit on something there. I think really good communication creates not just disseminates information, but I think it creates trust, and I think it helps lead to relationships.
And I think the biggest thing from my vantage point is the use in the truth of empathy. And if you have empathy as a leader, as a stakeholder, as a teacher, as a student, you are going to have the ability to create those one-on-one relationships, and those group dynamics will be successful because you can actually see and feel what the other people are going through. You either experience something similar, or you can put yourself in their shoes as much as possible, knowing that is kind of the one thing that I kind of lean on in my work. And I think that any good leader will have that, because that's how you can kind of build relationships with people that you have one thing in common. We're trying to educate your child, and that may be the only thing we have in common, but that's pretty important. And so the ability to handle that with empathy is key for us.
So Russ, how do you guys choose what channels to send what information, right? We talked about the different channels you use in communications, but when you get a piece of information and you've got an audience and you're like, okay, which way do I push this information out? How do you choose which channel to use?
So our options in, social media, and there's, 3 different options there: Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, our district website, and then direct email, mostly to staff or, parents and guardians. And so if it's a targeted message, it's somewhat easy. If it's for employees, you just send it to them. Or if it's an issue at a school, you send it to that school, those family members at a certain school. Or if it's a bigger issue, state makes a change into a law or practices that affects our families, we'll send an email to them as a whole for that message. And that's when I get nervous. It's like 140,000 people are going to get an email, and it's like, if you don't do it right, then shame on me. But then for social media and our website, our website's kind of like our record. And so that's going to be more official information. It's going to be more text, more documents. And so we'll use that as well. And we may share that on social as well to get people back that may not go to our website, on an everyday basis, because that makes sense to us. Facebook, we're trying to talk to adults. We're not trying to talk to our students. The schools handle that aspect of it. So for Facebook, it is, what's visual, what's timely. If there's a hurricane that's going to close the school district for a day or so, we send it out on all channels, because we're trying to end the media. We're trying to reach anybody we can, any way we can. If it's a great visual piece, we'll put that on Facebook and Instagram, because that's going to be something that's going to be able to be engaged with. And Twitter is, again, like a lot of people will kind of, is going to be more for like kind of nuts and bolts news. There's some visuals there, but it is somewhat limited. And so we have to look at, is a piece of information, is a story, as I call it, is that going to be good for only one, or is it going to be good for 5? And so sometimes the answer is 5, and we'll do that as well. But the goal is we're trying to message to the adults, mostly our families, but then also obviously there's something in the community as well. Facebook also is a really great place to share things that are happening in our schools, because all of our schools have their own social media. So it gets a little bit, the road gets clogged, but being able to showcase what they have going on is a way to kind of let people across the district know that, a school in the southern part of the county is doing this great thing and has these great, student leaders, and so somebody that lives in the north part of the county maybe can see that and kind of get some inspiration from that.
Nice. So looking at how communication affects or is utilized by leadership, right? We've talked before about how leadership is important, especially important in an organization of this size when you're affecting so many people. Brevard Public Schools impacts the lives of every single individual in the county. So good leadership is important, right? So how do you look at communication and leadership, and how do those two work together?
The way I think is, what's the stop? What's the end goal? What's the period on the sentence? How do you get there? The other part of that to me is you have to look at the content and then let the creativity come from there. You can't have a great idea that's creative, but then have no meat to that idea. So usually it's the content, where you want to go, and then you try to look at how can you be creative or attention grabbing or sell it in the best way. Not to be a salesperson, but to get attention on something that you think is important. And so when it comes to our leadership at the district, it's incumbent that we have, a plan of communication that is almost always consistent, so that if somebody at the district is saying one thing, somebody at the school level should hopefully have that same message, so that parents don't get confused, because it's not fair to them. And so when you have 8,000 employees, you're going to have 8,000 different people. And that's the beautiful tapestry of education. And that's why people have favorite teachers. That's why people have favorite principals. That's why family members are so engaged. And so it's really looking at how do we make sure that the message is as consistent as possible and across all of our channels at the school level as well as the district level.
So consistency is a lot of what I heard there, making sure that the message has a purpose. What is the purpose behind this? What is the consistency we're creating? Why do you think consistency in messaging, and I would say in general, is so important?
Well, people like to know what they can expect. And so if they get an email, I'm a parent, I have kids in our school system. So when I get an email from my kids' school, I know what to expect for the most part. It's a consistent, the timing of it's usually the same. If it's an update, the tone is kind of in that principal's voice. And so people understand what to expect. And so we want that at the district level, so that if we put something out on Facebook or we send a message to our entire families, or something that's kind of outside our scope with our business community, that they know who we are and they're not surprised by what's coming down in a particular one message or kind of a project that we're working on. It makes sense to them. And so if you don't do that, you're gonna lose your audience. And that's important, because we think we have something that's important to share. And if we kind of lose some eyeballs on that, then that's not success.
And I think consistency often leads to trust, right? And if I'm not consistent, you don't know what you're going to get from me, right? And so therefore you trust me less. And I think that's true of all brands. Anytime you're doing marketing or messaging, what can I expect from that brand? And if it shifts all the time, I begin to wonder, okay, what do they stand for? What's going on here? And I think that's important with all brands and in marketing in general, but communications, you see that even on a bigger scheme of what you're doing. You want to instill that trust. You want the community to trust the school district and say, hey, I believe you have our not only our best interest in mind, but you're competent and capable. And when you're not consistent, it can call those things into question. So I think you're definitely onto something there.
Sure. And a lot of that also gets down to the fact that a message coming from me to parents is not going to have the same resonance as a message that is coming from their child's principal. They know the child's principal. They know the child's teacher. And so we work with those school leaders to offer best practices, best advice on what they can do to kind of create that community, not only with their students, their staff, their families, the business leaders that donate and sweat equity and supplies to the school, but also a lot of our schools are like literally in neighborhoods. And so whether those people that live in those neighborhoods send kids to your school or not, they're your stakeholders. You want to be a good citizen, a good neighbor to those people as well. And so it's really making sure that our principals feel comfortable with that. And the most part, they always do. But obviously we have new people come in, new jobs, they get promoted. And so it's just making sure that they have the backing from us when they need it, so that they can be the ones who are kind of really out front talking with parents.
So that's another big thing with you guys. You have obviously a lot of communications that are centralized, but you have a lot of communications that are decentralized that I'm hearing here. So how do you, I mean, I can imagine the amount of different voices that you have to be careful with here. We just talked about consistency. So how do you handle the centralized communications, but also the decentralized communications?
Well, one thing that, it's hard to talk about myself, but I will say that, I try to always be available to principals, to anybody in the district that needs or has questions, no matter if it's, a weekend or at night, and it doesn't matter to me. As a former journalist, I'm used to always working odd hours and odd days. And so if there's an issue going on or there's a question that needs to be answered, it doesn't have to wait. And so we try to make sure that they all know that, so that they know that there's a resource there. And so it's not a situation where they feel like there's nobody that can help them when it comes to communication. That's my goal. That's my hope. And then the other part of that is just making sure that these are the best practices. We have meetings throughout the year in a group environment where we say, hey, these are kind of some of the must-dos, some of the you may want to do's, and some of the this is up to you because you're in charge of your building. But it's really a matter of kind of the back and forth. I have empathy for them, like I was saying earlier, understanding what they're doing, and that when they want to do a communication quickly, a lot of times they have 5 other things they're dealing with. And, I want to be able to step in, or my team wants to be able to step in and say, hey, do you need support? We can take this one part of it off your plate. And then you can handle other things that need to be handled at the same time as we're trying to figure out how to communicate with our families. But it's a partnership. It's a partnership between the district and every school building out there to make sure that the community has, like you said, the trust, the understanding that we're not perfect. We're not trying to hide anything. We're trying to do the best we can, and we will be held accountable by our parents with joy. We want them to hold us accountable. We want them to partner with us. And so that messaging has to come from a consistent basis, whether it's from me or from a principal.
So we've talked about how so much of Brevard is affected by what Brevard Public Schools does. And so one of the ways that I see that impact flowing through is all the community partnerships you guys have in many different types and styles. Can you share a little bit about those partnerships, the types of partnerships that you guys have?
And that's a lot of kind of some of the exciting stuff because, obviously the classroom education is number one. That teacher-student relationship is always going to be what we need to protect and advocate for. But when you're able to step outside that and bring in the community, whether it's city leaders, state leaders, business leaders, that is where we really get buy-in and we get support for the work. And we get great ideas, we get feedback, we get growth from that, not only for us, but for the county. And so we have partners in education, which is what it sounds like. We are looking for partners, business partners and faith-based partners that will come into our schools and donate sweat equity where they volunteer. They sponsor events that are happening that kind of support education. They do give, straight, money, services, and they get out of it, giving back to their community. We try to honor them as well. We give them awards at the end of the school year. Chambers of Commerce do the same thing. And it becomes a years-long relationship with, hundreds of businesses. Some of them are small, some of them are the larger ones, where they are really out there helping us do our job. Then obviously, some of the other partnerships that we have include, working with, chambers of commerce, places like Brevard, other big organizations where we can tell our story, and then they can kind of help amplify that through their channels as well. And then the last one I can kind of mention is higher education. With Florida Tech, we have a partnership with Palm Bay High School, where they call it Pirates to Panthers, where some of our students there can go up the street and attend classes at FIT. And then, of course, Eastern Florida State College is a big partner because any student can kind of, if they qualify, can dual enroll. So we have students that when they graduate from high school, they get their high school diploma, they get their associate's degree. A lot of them will also have certificates of certain industries that they've studied through our career and technical education programs. And so that's a big win. And then to kind of add on to that, our internship program that the school district runs as a whole with businesses. So some of our CTE program students, when they're juniors and seniors in their school, they can actually go to work during the week, get paid by a local company that, obviously they train them and give them real-life work experience. And then potentially at the end of that year of interning, that company has an employee that is ready to go to work. And then we've had that happen over the last 3 years where we've really been focused on creating internships for our students in real kind of world experiences with our companies. And so that's also a great way that we try to kind of partner, and communicating that message is a whole nother challenge, a whole nother endeavor that is exciting because you're getting to meet new different people every day.
Yeah, and I think those partnerships are so important because it allows the community to give back and to help really empower, educate, and really set up for success the kids in our community, right? As students that are growing up, they're gonna lead the charge of the next generation. It allows us to all step around that, which is really cool. I'm involved with a few organizations that do a lot with you guys. Junior Achievement. I've been in the classrooms with Junior Achievement. I love their mission, financial literacy for the students. So I've been in classrooms. I've helped. I've been on the board for many years. So a lot of interaction there. With the Children's Hunger Project, with the cool, amazing stuff they do there with helping kids who don't have those meals on the weekends, right? Their meals are basically being provided by you guys during the week, and during the weekends they don't have anything. Children's Hunger Project coming alongside you guys to help with that. There's some really cool partnerships, I think, there in the community that add to the experience. They take care of these kids, these students. So I love seeing that. And I also see from the other side of it, as we've done some work with those organizations and help them tell their story, that the communication only ripples out, right? You guys have all this communication that you're doing, but then they have, it all ties together. Right?
And you're so right with all the organizations that really, when you talk about, kind of the social services part of it, we educate the child, but we also care for that child's well-being. Literally their security and safety while they're in our schools, but also what happens to them outside of school. We do the best we can to kind of provide for them, and we have a lot of partners that kind of make that happen. And so we're always thankful for that, and we're always trying to kind of like grow that network, but also make sure that the partners that we have, we keep those relationships as strong as possible.
So speaking of communication, what are some of the new and exciting things coming up for the school district?
Well, there are a couple things that are keeping us busy. We're trying to get the message out. One of them is this overall growth, which is usually a good thing, and we think it's a good thing here. We're building a new middle school in the Vieira area. We've broken ground on that, and so that will be opening up in August of 2024. That will fill a need of an area that continues to grow and be built out. And so it's going to be state of the art. The curriculum is going to be heavy on STEM. It's going to be an amazing place, and we're excited about it. Also down in West Melbourne, we're expanding the choice school there. There's a waiting list, and so we are making it bigger. That's happening now. This is getting started. We have another school up in Titusville, South Lake, that just had an expansion project as well. There's a couple others that are going on that will help us serve our students better, that we're excited about. And then, really that's not going to end there. I mean, we know in Palm Bay, it's also the largest city in the county, growth. We need to look at that, and that's not going to be in the next year or so, but that's coming down in the next 5 years maybe. And then with career and technical education, that's kind of been something we've discussed at a couple points of this conversation. We are continuing to expand that as well. This year we have 2 new programs, carpentry at Vieira High School, and then an aqua science that kind of really works with the Indian River Lagoon up at Cocoa Beach. They started this year in August of 2023. And this is the second year for our firefighting academy. So we have firefighters being trained in high school to be ready to kind of go into a fire academy once they graduate, if they want to pursue that field. And then next year, we're going to have a kind of a space academy that's going to be at one of our northern schools. One of the big things about Brevard County is it continues to grow, develop. People are moving here. A lot of smart people are moving here. And so we want to be able to kind of walk alongside that growth when it comes to the space industry. So we're excited about that. That will launch in August of 2024.
A lot of stuff going on.
We stay busy.
You're staying busy, which is why I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me for a little bit this morning.
Sure.
Thanks so much for coming in, Russ. I appreciate you just talking a little bit about what it means to be a part of such a large organization that has so many people to communicate to. So thanks again for sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Industry Insights. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, comment, or even drop us a line over at rockpapersimple.com.